Hi, everybody. My name is Connor Lynch with Westwood Media Center. We are proud to be partnering with the Council on Aging to provide virtual programming through our cable channels and online to keep seniors engaged throughout the coronavirus pandemic. We can be found on Comcast channels 8 and 12, Verizon channels 32 and 42, as well as online at westwoodmediacenter.tv. I'm happy to turn things over to your host, the Director of the Council on Aging, Lena Arena DeRosa. Lena, take it
Thanks, Connor. It's always a pleasure working with cable. And again, I thank you every time, but I think our seniors are feeling very isolated. And we're very, very blessed that Westwood Media Center is willing to help us sort of at least create something for them to do during the day. So today we're going to do something very different, and we're going to continue doing different things like this. We're going to talk about the secret life of backyard and migrating birds. We're very blessed. I'm going to read this so I say it correctly. Sean Kent is a field biologist and an educator for the Museum of American Bird Art at Mass Audubon. Sean has conducted research in Massachusetts at the Boston Harbor Islands, the Elizabeth Islands, at Massasoit Community College, Belize, New Mexico, and Arizona. Sean has a master's in biology, a master's in biology from Northeast University, and a BA in biology from the College of Holy Cross. And I also want to make sure that I thank the Westwood Culture Council because they have underwritten this wonderful program. Take it away, Sean. Welcome, and we're so grateful that you're here to help us today to learn about our backyard birds.
Hi, Lena. Hi, Connor. And thank you so much for having me on today. And thank you very much to the Massachusetts and Westwood Cultural Council for providing funding for this program. As Lena said, my name is Sean Kent, and I work for Mass Audubon, and I'm stationed just down the street at the Museum of American Bird Art in Canton. And I'm really delighted today to bring you a short program about migration and the migratory birds that you see here. And right on the screen that you can see right here, these are tree swallows that nest at the museum that you can see all spring and summer, and they're migrating right now, which we'll talk about. And then here, these are two turkeys. These are two turkeys that were born this year. And I took a picture. This picture was taken this morning on a nature walk that I was doing with seniors in Stoughton on a socially distant nature walk today that I wanted to share with you today. But what I want to look at a little bit today and talk to you more about are all the amazing birds that are in the area that you may see or may not see, and kind of migration and migratory patterns, and then a little bit of interesting information about some of those birds. So here is one of my favorite birds, and this is an eastern bluebird that some are residents, but some will migrate, and the majority of birds migrate each year. And then a bird that's migrating right now, along with many other ones, and this is one of our earliest birds that come back. This is the yellow-rumped warbler through here. And these are just a few pictures that I took of that yellow-rumped warbler that you can see here. And I'll be talking about this bird and then other birds that are migrating through here. And you can see all the different little patterns and intricacies of their feathers, their beautiful colors. And this is a really great bird to tell you that kind of spring is here and winter is kind of behind us through there. And they're actually starting to migrate now back to their wintering grounds. And in this picture right here, you can see that it's hanging right here on a vine. Its colors are much duller now. So it's not got the bright color patterns of the bright yellows anymore and the bright blacks. It's molted, it's changed its feather colors. And it's on a vine that you can see on the tree right here. And believe it or not, its entire digestive system changes, going from insects that it's eating during the spring and summer. So it can actually start to eat fruits, and it lengthens. And these are poison ivy berries. So this is eating poison ivy during the fall to load up on fats and sugars so it can actually do it on its long distance migration. And they're in huge flocks right now, and they're about to leave Massachusetts. And I'm going to show you how many birds have actually been flying through Massachusetts and flying through the country, because it's really an incredible amount. So since we are at the Museum of American Bird Art, we have a lot of bird-related art. And this is one of our most well-known pieces by an artist, Charlie Harper. And this is called The Mystery of the Missing Migrants. He painted this. He's an avid bird watcher and lover of nature. And he painted this right around the time Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring, because he started to notice that lots of birds that he loved were, you know, in lower numbers or just disappearing. So he drew this, he painted this to draw attention to it. And also, if you look at this painting, it's a fascinating story about bird migration, its biology, and it's really subtle. But if you notice, the painting is actually is at night. You can see the crescent moon right there and the stars through there. And I'll show you the majority of bird migration, millions and millions of birds in the country are flying and migrating through the night and not during the day. And we'll talk about that too. So I want to talk about bird migration. Is this really spectacular global phenomenon, you know, that captures your attention every spring and fall. You know, its writings even started as long ago as Aristotle in Greek. And this is a yellow warbler that migrates and lives in kind of the meadow habitats around us. So for bird migration, on certain nights, and tonight just happens to be one of those nights, and yesterday was one of those nights, there are hundreds of millions of birds migrating through North America. And there are millions of birds this week that are migrating just through Massachusetts. So like I showed you that painting by Charlie Harper at night, birds generally take off a little bit after sunset and fly all through the night and land just a little bit before dawn to then go and feed and rest and forage. So some will migrate each night and then stop flying, but some will migrate for 2, 3, 4 days nonstop. And they can go from, you know, like the red knot can go all the way from Tierra del Fuego in Argentina up through the Arctic. So it can span entire continents, let alone just countries through there. And I want to talk to you about how we actually start learning a lot about how millions of birds are actually migrating through the night. And that's being done through what you're seeing on the nightly weather report through there. And, you know, each year, well over 2 billion birds are flying through just the Gulf of Mexico alone. And these radar stations are picking up on bird migration. So they're typically picking up on weather patterns. But during migration, when you have millions of birds flying through, they'll actually show up on weather radar as a rainstorm. But instead of a rainstorm, it's a huge flock of birds. And what I want to show you in this picture right here, and you can see this a little bit with the mouse right through here. And I just want to highlight right there, that this is an example down in Delaware. Okay, right here and right here. And what they actually put out, they've got a weather radar, surveillance radar station. You can see the weather radar right there. But then they'll also have speakers that are picking up on the sounds that the birds are making, and also thermal imaging sensors, so they can actually see the heat flying over them. And birds will actually make different calls at night, like songs. So these are all different warblers that are migrating and live in, you know, North America, you know, could be in New England, could be in Canada, etc. And they all have different patterns. So like the sound waves are coming out of my mouth right now, and they have certain patterns. And you can see the American redstart, that's the song that it's making. The black and white warbler stays the same pattern. This Blackburnian warbler goes up and down, and they can process that through different computer programs and actually identify what species are flying over that night, and also how many of them there are. And this is all kind of research in the past few decades, the past few years, I mean, right through there. And so just before I flip to the next slide, just think in your head, like how many birds are actually migrating through North America just over the weekend. Just think of the weekend, or this is actually going to be in a few days from now, but just think how many might have been flying through in the middle of September. So last night, with these forecasts through weather radar and like long-term data, so the data that they had from years, 2019, 2018, 2017, 340 million birds are migrating on September 22nd to the 23rd. 350 million birds September 23rd and 24th, and almost 300 million birds, so 285 million birds on September 24th and 25th. So you're looking at almost 1 billion birds flying through the country just in those 3 days. And so this is something called Birdcast, and I've got the link down there. It's the Aero Eco Lab. It's a research organization in Colorado. And where the light is brightest, so here and here, and you can see it's relatively bright over here, that's where the migration intensity is the most intense. So you can see in Massachusetts over the September 25th time period, September 23rd, excuse me, it's really high going through there. And you can kind of see, again, just a close up of these color maps of where a lot of these birds are actually migrating through there. And it's just really, I don't think you realize, I never did, on how many birds are actually migrating at certain time periods through there. So if you look just at September 22nd in Massachusetts, over 1.6 million birds were estimated to be flying just through the entire state. And what this map is right here is it's called a lights out alert. So you can see it's high, medium, low, or none. So the entire state of Massachusetts is at a high level. And what happens here is if skyscrapers keep their lights on, these birds may be flying at near levels of, building size, and they'll see the lights reflecting, the lights coming out of the skyscrapers, and they'll fly into the windows. And you could have dozens to hundreds to thousands of birds being killed. You'll occasionally see this a few years ago at the NASCAR Hall of Fame, I think in Cleveland, Ohio. They had their lights on and over 1,000 birds flew into the windows and all died at the window. So they start putting these bird forecasts out because the majority of birds are flying on only a few nights, kind of weeks per year. So if you're turning the lights out, and you can see it in this graph this image right here, if you're looking at like the light pollution where it's bright and where the lights out alerts actually are, if you can turn lights off in these larger buildings, you can be saving the lives of, not dozens of birds, but thousands to tens of thousands of birds that are falling in, hitting these windows right through there. And then again, just to reiterate, this is where they're using satellite data, weather radar data. They're using listening devices, to listen to the birds. And then they're using thermal imaging, so seeing the warmth coming through the clouds and all these different remote sensing tools. And I'm going to show you some other tools that you're using through the University of Cornell at their lab of ornithology, where citizen scientists, so anybody in the community can submit data and they can use that to understand where the birds that you love in your backyard, how they're actually moving and migrating through there. And so I bring this weather radar back up because then if you look at the video that you're seeing on the screen right here, this is a video of weather radar data from Key West, Florida. And as you see, as the video moves along, you'll see it turn green and whoosh, over 1 million birds are flying over the Florida Keys right there. And it's actually being picked up as if it was rain, but it's not rain what you're seeing here. What you're seeing is it's actually a huge flock of birds. And it's really just incredible to think that that's being picked up as if it was a thunderstorm down in Florida right there. So what I'd like to do here is tie all this migration into a bird that's really charismatic, one you love, and it's beautiful. So this is a Baltimore Oriole that I photographed this past May. And I mean, I have to tell you, cherry trees and apple trees, they're such great places to just kind of look for movement for birds, because you'll get so many different birds during migration and resident birds going in there, going into the flowers, and they're looking for food, and they won't notice you if you're not moving too much, and you can really see these beautiful birds. I was only maybe 40 feet away from the Baltimore Oriole, but I'm always stopping and looking at apples and cherries and other fruiting trees in the spring. And here's another picture of the Baltimore Oriole that I took at the Museum of American Bird Art in Canton. We really have wonderful grounds here that you can come and see lots of wildlife. And this came back this spring. And what it's doing here is you can see the buds of the maple tree right here, and you can see the flower, the leaves coming out right there. And what it's doing is it's looking for insects within those buds. It's called gleaning, and it's loading up for food before it starts to nest right through there. And it's actually looking for nests and going through territories right there. And so what I want to show you here, what I want to show you here is the Baltimore Oriole. And what you're seeing down here, this is from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. So the purple color means it's in high abundance. The lighter colors is in lower abundance. So this, if you look right here, this is January, February, March time period going up through December. And I'm going to play a video through here, and you're going to see the colors change, and you're going to see it on migration right through here. And all this data is collected by scientists, but also people in the community who like watching birds and submit this to a site by Cornell called eBird, and you can do this on your phone and you can play a role in this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this, and you're going to see how the the Baltimore Oriole migrates and then where it is during the summer. Okay, so February, March, April, whoosh, migration, May, June. So you can see high abundance up in Massachusetts. Now September, whoosh, all back to Central and South America through there. And that's how it's spending the year. And you're seeing this in kind of real-time data. This is data aggregated from 2018 and a little bit before. So February, March, April, whoosh, okay, July, August, now September, whoosh, October. You know, you can see that migration is happening very quickly. And then you can kind of start to get a sense of, oh yeah, 350 million birds could be migrating on one night in September and August. October, right through here. And so here's just another Baltimore Oriole abundance map. So during the breeding season, you can see, you know, middle part of the country up through Massachusetts, a little bit into Maine, a little bit into Canada, but you can see all these maps that are there. And if you go to the Cornell website, you can start to look at your favorite birds and kind of see where they're, see how they're increasing or decreasing and how their movements are going there too. And you can always feel free to contact me if you want more information on that too as well. So that's just a little example of bird migration right there. And then if we go back to Charlie Harper's image and we think about the missing migrants, you've seen recently from Audubon and from Cornell, and this was published in the Journal of Science, that it's been estimated that over 2 billion birds have disappeared in the past about 40 or 50 years. And so the bird population now is 2 billion less than it was just 50 years ago. In Massachusetts, okay, we've already seen that 30% of the bird species are declining, especially, for example, like a lot of our forest birds. As the climate warms, the forests are going to change from like a sugar maple dominated forest and, you know, maples to more oak and hickory. So a lot of the birds that rely on the forest, they're going to slowly start declining in Massachusetts. Even, for example, like the chickadee is predicted to decline over the next 50 years within Massachusetts. And, you know, studying bees and the beavers that I've seen, this can happen relatively rapidly. With bees, it can happen relatively rapidly with where we are at birds. And I want to draw your attention to the mystery of the missing migrants right here, because Charlie's favorite bird, Harper, right here, is this wood thrush right here. And I want to show you a picture of a wood thrush. Okay, right here. And this is going to be a common resident bird as well during the summer. It will breed up here. We'll have other birds that, and this is in the same family as cardinals. This is a hermit thrush. Okay, so wood thrush you just saw, hermit thrush. These are some of Charlie's favorite birds that you can see in this picture. And this is a common summer resident in our forest. And sometimes this is my favorite bird, because when it's March and still kind of cold and dreary, the hermit thrushes will start migrating back up. And when you see those birds, you'll know that spring is kind of on the way. So we look back at this and we talk a little bit about bird decline. So like, why are birds declining? Kind of what small things can you do that might actually have big impacts on the bird populations? So here's a bird that you probably see at your feeders in the wintertime. This is a tufted titmouse. And if you look, you'll notice that there's something in its mouth. This is a picture I took at Mount Auburn Cemetery a few years ago during May. And if you look right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Whoops. And at least in this, okay, in this bird, it has at least 7 caterpillars in its mouth right now. Okay, we look at the chickadee. And again, like I said, looking at dogwood, apple trees and cherry trees, you can see the chickadee right in here. This is just right outside of our office window in the back of the museum right here. And you can see the caterpillar right in its mouth right there. So birds require incredible amounts of food every day, not only for themselves during the year, but also for their baby birds. This is a chickadee nest that I took a picture of that's at the museum in 2016 right here. And there's 6 eggs in here, and there's 1 chickadee, 2 chickadees, 3 chickadees. There's an egg here, so 4. There's a 5th egg down underneath there. And the animals, the chickadees need an incredible number, the birds need an incredible number of food to feed right through there. So I want you to kind of think of, how many caterpillars do they actually need? And this is going to tie into how you can help back at home. I want to show you this picture as we're talking about that, what birds they actually need of the magnolia warbler that you can see right here. And what I want to show you in this picture here is just another one, these migratory birds. And you can see how on this leaf right here that I've got the laser pointer on, it's kind of missing part of the leaf. You can see it's kind of missing part of the leaf there. There's holes over here. These birds are gleaning, they're eating tons and tons of caterpillars, and mostly caterpillars, but other insects that are in the tree. You can see, caterpillars disappeared. That's its last known whereabouts right there. And then again, here's the caterpillar right there, going through there. So as we talked about, how many caterpillars does this, over just a few weeks, does this nest actually need? And then as we're thinking about that some more, I want to show you what the nest actually looks like. So this was a picture in a nest box, but I want to show you what an actual chickadee nest looks like. Did you know that chickadees act like woodpeckers? So in really soft wood, by especially by streams and water sources is really good. They'll actually peck out and rip out and make their own nests within tree cavities. They're not making nests like robins might make nests. So this is a picture I took over in Easton at Wheaton Farm a few years ago. And you can see the chickadee coming out, shaking its head, wood chips flying through there. This is what a baby chickadee looks like here. This is by a photographer named Sean Carey, who volunteers and takes an incredible bird photograph at the museum. And this was taken, I believe, at the museum as well. But raising a chickadee family, or just a bird family in general, is incredibly hard and time consuming. So over 3 weeks, a chickadee is going to need to collect between 6,000 and 9,000 insects just for those 5 baby birds. It's clutch of chickadees right through there. And to kind of put this in perspective, if you look at a native oak tree outside, the research that has been done by a professor and his grad students, Doug Tallamy down in Delaware, among others, he finds upwards of 400 different caterpillars on certain types of native oak trees. You look at a native dogwood tree, might have 150, different species of caterpillars on that. You look at a Japanese dogwood tree, he finds maybe 1 caterpillar total on that entire tree. So a non-native kind of cultivar tree has very little insects that are using it to eat. Whereas if you look at native plants, they have many more insects on there. So as the environment starts to lose a lot of these native species, you're not just losing native plants, okay? You're losing the food sources that these birds are relying on. And their metabolic levels are so high, okay, that if they're not feeding constantly, they're going to have trouble surviving. And then especially the next generation is going to have trouble surviving through there. On that, and that's just a little bit about why it's important to plant native plants right through there, and why that's so important for not only birds but the whole intricate web of the ecosystem, the whole intricate web of the ecosystem through there. And so what I'd like to leave you with here, okay, is I'd like to also just talk about briefly the picture that we saw at the beginning of the tree swallows, okay? So tree swallows are birds, especially if you go to where their nest boxes are, or the habitats where they are, you can really watch wonderful aerial combat and then also flying through there. And these are doing really well. And I'm going to tie in a nice migration story here as well. But these pictures I took this spring as well. And you can see these 2 birds are fighting over the nest box right here, coming to the point of where it's actually pulling feathers out of each other right there as they compete over these nest boxes and this resource right here, to the point of where it's pulling it off the box right through there. This is where the picture at the beginning comes from. And you can kind of see this whole wonderful natural history scene going on back and forth, all, spring through there until they're able to be successful. They mate, and then you've got two birds at the same box right here. And you have these beautiful feather nests that they're building inside these boxes, which you can see here. But the reason I wanted to bring this in the fall is in the fall, they flock up and form these huge aggregations or flocks to looking at this point. I mean, look at how many tree swallows and other swallows, there's bank swallows and barn swallows in there that migrate back to Central America each year. And you can see that with these large aggregations, which if you have me walking around, especially in the evening now, you may see hundreds of tree swallows flying in the fields. That happens every year at the museum, especially over water, because if you go to the Connecticut River, look how large those flocks can actually be. So I mean, this is stuff that's happening in the state. And if you're, especially if you're taking time to walk outside, the more you're kind of observing and seeing, the more wonderful things that you'll actually see through there. And then what I'll leave you with is birds that have just recently migrated. And these are our egrets through here. And you can see they're flocking up. And these are pictures that I just took a few years ago and flying away. And what I thought, just with these pictures with that, I would be more than happy to take any questions from Lena. And thank you very much for your kind attention to the presentation. I really appreciate it. And I'm gonna stop sharing my screen right now so we can both be on the screen at the same time.
I have to tell you, I learned a lot. That was absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much. I mean that sincerely. That was terrific, Sean.
Oh, thank you so much.
I'm fascinated. But I do have some basic questions. I
Great.
love the whole migration. That the migration is going to happen, but you don't realize. Can I ask you? This has nothing to do with the questions that
That's
we've
okay.
written, but does Boston Skyline, when they know the migration is happening, do they turn off the lights?
I'm not
Does
sure.
anyone turn off the lights? Should I be turning off the lights? Should we as a society be turning off the lights for 2 weeks at night?
I mean, that's why those alerts go out. So I'm not sure exactly what's happening necessarily in Boston, because Boston, believe it or not, along with the North Shore and the South Shore, those are huge migrant traps. So what I mean by that is, like at the Fens has over like a bird list. It's 180 different birds have been seen just by, the Museum of Fine Arts, like over 200 at Mount Auburn Cemetery, because it's an urban environment. And then you've got these small patches of kind of like islands of natural or semi-natural areas. So the birds would just flock all in through there. So I'm not sure if, like, say, the Prudential Center or the Millennium Tower or Hancock are turning off the lights. But, if they weren't 10 years ago, they're much more likely to be doing that now. I just don't know that answer.
Wow. I hope they are, because when you said how many birds got killed, my heart just sank.
Yeah, and so I usually don't put those in the presentations, but you
either.
can just, if you type in that NASCAR Hall of Fame and chimney swifts, it was like 800 to 1,000 chimney swifts just kept flying into the building. Yeah.
Okay, so now I'm going to bring it back to local.
Sure.
So a lot of us have bird feeders out in our backyards.
Yes.
But we're never sure, and I'm an Audubon person, so am I supposed to continue to feed birds all winter long? Should I stop at some point? There never seems to be consensus on that. What's your feeling on that?
The best benefit for birds is to feed them through the winter.
Okay.
Black oil sunflower seeds are really great. They're a lot of time during the spring and summer, their diet shifts to mostly insects anyway. So they might be supplementing from the feeder, but they're not relying on it. And people
in the winter, it's okay.
Yeah, because you're much more likely to, the birds may be relying on that, especially during harsher winters. And black oil sunflower seeds are really, really good for that.
Is there a better place to put your bird feeder to help them through the winter?
So the birds are going to be costing out benefits and risks through that. So if your bird feeder is near a place where they have cover, could be a tree, could be some shrubs, they're going to feel safer there and less stressed out. If it's out in the open, they just may never use it, because they're constantly, there could be hawks or other animals that they're trying to make sure they're not becoming there. Because when you put out a bird feeder for the smaller birds, it's also a feeder for the larger birds, because they're going to go in and get the larger birds. Yeah.
So where's a good place to go for a walk? Because we are in the middle of a pandemic and there's nothing better than going for a walk to see these migrating birds. Where's the best place to go?
So in your area, you've got the Museum of American Bird Art is not too far away from Westwood, and we have 120 acres right here.
And that's in Canton,
that's in
correct?
Canton, right off of 95 and 128 on Washington Street. So it's
And
very
it's
accessible.
called?
The Museum of American Bird Art. It's
Okay,
at
we're going to put that on, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead,
At
great.
963 Washington Street. And then you've got Hale Reservation in Westwood,
Yes.
which is really lovely. And then down in Sharon, there's a Mass Audubon Wildlife Sanctuary called Moose Hill Wildlife Sanctuary. One of my favorites is a little bit farther away, but Stony Brook Wildlife Sanctuary in Norfolk with the boardwalk is just spectacular. You know, that's really a can't miss site. But then also along the Charles River in Westwood, Dedham, and West Roxbury is really a lovely place to also be. And especially during the winter where it's not frozen, you'll see a lot of wonderful ducks.
Great. Yeah. And finally, what are good resources to learn more about migrating and backyard birds? What would you suggest?
Well, I think one of the, I was hoping I had a copy in front of me because I didn't think there. David Sibley just wrote a book. We actually have an exhibition with all his art called What It's Like to Be a Bird. And it's a wonderful book with short essays and beautiful artwork about all different ways birds are birds. And it's super accessible, it's super well written. That is a great resource. You know, field guides are great, but these tell stories behind the birds so you can start to kind of get a better sense of kind of who they are and become better friends with them. So I think that's a great resource there. Mass Audubon has wonderful rep resources. The University of Cornell's Lab of Ornithology is great. And they also have wonderful apps that you can have on your phone to listen to bird songs as well too.
Sean, thank you so much. This was fantastic. Again, thanks for Westwood Culture Council because they helped underwrite this program. And I would love to have you back in the spring if you'd consider it. And
absolutely.
Another program in the spring. I know my seniors are going to love this. For all my seniors out there, thank you for joining us. Sean, thank you again for coming. My seniors, don't forget to wear your mask. No. Don't forget to wash your hands and don't forget to social distance. Yeah, wear your mask, Sean. And finally, bird watching. That's something you can do during a pandemic. You can go for a walk. It's a great thing to do to get outside and you don't have to be with a lot of people. Thank you again, Sean. Thank you, Westwood Media Center, and we'll be in touch. Take care.
Take care. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.